everybody. Welcome to Inside Improv here today on this Friday, April, what is it, the 16th?
16th.
Yes.
What a week it has been. Where it was tax, is it tax day? Was it tax day? Did they move tax day?
They moved tax to May.
And that was the least of anybody's concerns this week. But we're here. We're going to chat. We have very special guest Jill Bernard from Huge Theater in Minneapolis.
Yay!
As well as Citizen of the World, festival performer, teacher from all over, and Spanish speaker now. Is that right, Jill?
Maybe. The jury's out.
That's perfect. The second half of this show will be in Spanish.
That's right. Elise will test your Spanish. Elise Rodriguez from Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
Was that good?
Rodriguez, yeah.
Okay, good. I didn't think about it too much. I just tried to blow through it. So that's
right.
the key.
Just go for it.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well,
And Joe Bill of Chicago and Improv Festivals of the World as well. Hello.
the simple name by which all simple names shall be measured.
Sorry. People are always like, for John Tim, they're always like, are you...
John, Tim, Joe, Bill.
Yeah, they're like, why do you always say both names? Like, well, there's a lot of Johns in my life. There's only one John Tim. So, well, how are y'all doing? We've been talking pre-going live about talking about improv today. And it's just been a fuck of a week with a lot of tragedy, social injustice, and trauma in general. And we started talking about, what does it mean to entertain and when to entertain during traumatic times. But first, just Jill, how are you? How are you doing over there, Jill?
It's funny that you said Spanish speaking because I had a rehearsal in Spanish this morning for a show that they're putting together in Peru. And last week I felt terrible. I was like, oh no, I don't speak Spanish at all. This is disastrous. And then I spent the week like trying to figure out what to do. And today I set up my phone so that it would do the Google transcript as the rehearsal went on. And it turns out Google transcription is trash. Like even worse than Google Translate. The Google transcription is freaking trash. And it honestly made me feel great because I was like, oh, my Spanish, me listening to what people are saying is more precise than the best computer program that is currently available. But like there was a part where Google Translate says that he said, and there, for example, is where we can go, and Jorge is good to join the eastern line of albatrosses flying. And like, maybe I missed something, and Jorge had added in. But then, okay, this was actually the most beautiful thing that happened. We were talking about how it would be good to name the characters right away at the top. But the Google Translate says, let's baptize the characters soon. Because suddenly Jorge is calling us like other names. And I was like, shit, I got to ask Rodrigo if he did say baptize the characters. Because isn't that poetic as hell? The concept of baptizing your character, like you enter the scene and baptize your character so that when I call you Allison, you've been like baptized Allison. That's who you really are. Like, I hope that's what he said.
I wonder if it's like a weird take on christened because you christened.
Oh, sure.
And they somehow,
I don't know. There wasn't time to ask. Also, I didn't want to make every rehearsal about how I don't speak Spanish that great. Like that seems like a detriment to the process.
We had a game show that had a lot of fun little bits in it at Curious. It was a rental or a co-production. And they did this thing where they took a common phrase, a familiar phrase or expression, put it into Google Translate, translated it through multiple languages, and then back into English. And the goal was the contestants had to guess what the original saying or phrase was.
So it's like a real common sentence that you would recognize.
Yeah. Like an early bird gets the worm. Yeah, would just turn into some crazy version where you could see the connection ultimately, maybe, but sometimes not. So I think there's a lot of potential for Google Translate to create.
Yeah, I thought really like that is the odd upside. Like I'm doing better with my brain than this computer, so that actually felt really nice. Like I'm okay. And it kept getting caught on the same words that I was getting caught on. You know, so like you're not helping at all.
We got a suggestion of dildo.
Great.
Do you know how to say dildo in Spanish?
You know what? No.
Elise, do you know how to say dildo in Spanish?
I would say pene falso. False.
Pene falso.
I'm going to look that up. Yeah.
Here's the thing.
Words. There's a lot of words like parasol. Parasol is for sun, right?
Parasol, right.
So there's a lot of words that are the extension para plus the noun that is about. Like, so I hope it's like para fucking or.
Oh. You know what it is?
Para placer.
Para satisfaction.
Para divorce. Okay. Consoladora.
What is it?
Consoladora?
Consoladora. It's basically a consoling person. Consoladora would be like a woman who consoles almost.
Yeah.
So it's like
a security blanket almost, something.
Yeah.
Consoladora.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Is a dildo. Or in masculine is consolador.
Consolador. Okay.
Basically,
is that like a flashlight or?
Consoladora. Dildo is. Oh man, there's like a whole. I'm not going down that route at this point.
So you know, like what vocabulary is available to you as a non-native speaker of a language is super fascinating to me. I remember like standing in the airport in Lima, like, how come I know the word for duck and not the word for boarding pass? This is like a horrible situation. How come I know? I can tell you
know what's crazy? I don't know the word for boarding pass. Un pasaje.
Do you want to know it? Do you want to know what it is? It's a boarding pass. That's what I call boarding pass.
Un pasaje. It's your ticket is un pasaje. But I learned that in traveling. You're right. It's not a vocabulary that you would get if you don't use it every day.
Yeah. It's like I could say anything about ducks or bears. Do you want to know if bears eat bread? I could tell you about that. Thanks, Duolingo. But I can't tell you anything about. Yeah.
I have that happens to me often on stage.
Yeah.
So I have this
where I don't know what the words are.
Let me know if it happens to any of you. I don't know if Elise and Jill, I don't know if you play Word Blitz, but Joe and I do. And some other I do have a list of improvisers I cycle through, but I sometimes see French words and I try them anyway, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Do you ever do any rapid fire things where like Spanish gets in the way? It's like a boggle.
Like a Scrabble game?
Yeah, okay. Word Blitz is like boggle. So you're like picking out as many words as you can, as fast as you can. So I'll be like, oh, tête, chien. You know, just like, oh, nope, that's not something in English. Are there situations, because Elise, your first language is Spanish? And then when did you start speaking English?
when they threw me in school. That's how I learned English, is just like, here, child, go to school. And that's how I learned English. It's just by I know a lot of people in general in Miami, and a lot of my Hispanic friends that they don't teach their kids English because that's how we all grew up. Like they'll just only speak to their children in Spanish, and then their grandparents are speaking to the children in Spanish, so the children all sound like old Cuban ladies, which is really funny. Like the way, because they literally sound like, I'm not kidding, like grandmas. Like all the little girls sound like grandmas, and all the little boys sound like grandmas.
That's really cute.
Like
What is
just like grandparents. Like
What is something that adds the character to the language? That is it, like the choice of words? Is it the accent that makes them sound like grandmas?
there's just so many different like Spanish accents and Spanish just like origins. Like all the countries in South America have a different accent and dialect, and in the islands everybody's different too. But I think I would say a distinguishing factor is the tone of voice more than the words themselves. Now, in South America, there are a lot of words that I don't like. It's almost like two completely different worlds. Like Caribbean Spanish and South American Spanish is like, whoa. But it's the tone of voice that I noticed is the most different thing in from all of the areas, is the tone of voice. Like Cubans are very, again, and it depends from where you are, but Cubans are very ultra direct. Some other Spanish-speaking cultures are not as direct. And that got me in a lot of trouble in improv because, it would be like either on stage or not on stage, because it's like, calm down. Like, I'm fucking calm. Like, come on. like, do I look fucking upset to you? I'm not upset. Like, things like that. So I think the tone of voice is a big difference.
I really want to know where the link is in Latin culture and Arabic culture, because it's pretty much the same. You look like a cousin. The volume and the intensity and the directness are very, very similar. Which is why when you meet Wendy and Lori, they were instantly. One of my favorite things was actually Wendy Mateo was in my directing project for Second City, and I had everybody write a sketch as an assignment that only they could write, and what that meant they could figure out for themselves. So I just wanted them to bring in something that felt very like them. So Wendy brought in this sketch that was inspired by Telemundo. And the women were in the kitchen and they were cooking, and then the men are watching TV in another area of the stage, and they're yelling back and forth at each other, and then it starts getting argumentative, and then it increases, and then the music starts playing, and everyone would get up and dance, and then the music would stop and like reset. And it was hilarious. And I was like, I know that. I know what that is. Yeah. I am very literally familiar with that. So then we translated it. I was like, let's do it in Spanish. And we translated it, or she did, and she did all the parts for everyone so they could listen to it over and over again. We did the whole thing in Spanish, and it became a really interesting litmus test for ethnicity. Because some people would come up to me and they'd be like, I did not know what was happening. And then somebody would come up and be like, my family's Lebanese. That's exactly what every day is like. Just be like, I'm Syrian. She's Dominican. It's all the same somehow.
Yeah.
It was super fun. But that's what people don't understand, is that there are cultures where you could yell at each other and then 2 seconds later be like, come make dinner. And then you're over it. So, sorry, Jill. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, linguistically, Spanish is filled with Arabic. Down to the very, anytime you hear the beginning, there's a lot of, because, in 7-Eleven, the Moors crossed over from Africa into Spain, and there was already a lot of merchants, like a lot of words that have to do with math, a lot of words that have to do with counting and money, because it was already a commercial exchange. So you'll find lots of words that start with al. The word for ojalá, God willing,
Yeah.
Allah, you know him?
Oh yes.
Oh,
I never thought about that.
Heard of that guy?
Para Allah? Is it Para Allah?
That's wild.
Yeah.
You just gave me a better education than the public school system ever did. Just that FYI.
Oh, it's so fascinating.
Well, and a lot of math comes from the Middle East, which people don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alcalde.
Alcalde's mayor.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
What's older brother in Spanish?
Hermano mayor.
Yeah, there's not like a special.
Mm-hmm.
In
You're
Arabic,
just a brother.
Okay. Yeah. In Arabic, there you call your older brother in a traditional Arabic culture, and then you call him older brother. You know, you call him that all the time. Like Abdi would be your older brother, like the mom, dad.
So much to know. There's so much to know. Everywhere.
It's too much.
So much to know. No, it's like we will never know it all. We'll never know it all.
No.
Yeah.
But we're gonna die trying. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us.
Okay.
That's to me. I feel. Yeah. That spark to learn. You know, I think is such an interesting thing. Like, I don't understand anyone who doesn't have it. I don't. It's hard.
No,
for
you
me.
know.
Really?
My family is split into two distinct groups: people who love to learn and people who always want to stay at the Holiday Inn Express because you know exactly the layout of the room and what will be at the breakfast bar. You know, like to know exactly what life will be.
Shout out to egg discs.
Shout out to yeah. Like my family is exactly divided in half as to people who would like for everything to always be the same. My grandparents were very proud when they were alive that they have been to all 50 states of the United States, but have never left the United States.
Wow.
And like that's cool to have been to all 50 states, but to also be distinctly proud of never having left. And when I asked about it, my grandma was like, we have everything we need here in the United States. We have mountains, we have beach, we've seen it all. We don't need more. And there was no, there was no curiosity. It was more comforting to know exactly how things will be. You know, nothing risky will ever happen, and nothing unfamiliar will ever occur.
So you're saying they weren't improvisers?
No, very much. My grandmother only came to see me do one show, and I'll never forget it because she sat in the front row, and this was her face. Like she didn't, and it was ComedySportz, which is very accessible. Very accessible. It wasn't some obscure think piece. And yeah, she didn't enjoy it.
My dad doesn't like improv. My dad straight up tells me I don't like improv. Any shows he's gone to, he just says it is. The entire time.
Is he nervous for you? That's what I've found, is that some people feel nervous watching improvisers. They're nervous.
No, he literally tells me like I don't like, this is not funny to me. I remember he came to Sarasota for the first time and he was talking to Will, and Will's like, oh, you know, thinking that he's gonna like, you know, mess with my dad, and he's like, oh, so I hear you don't like improv. My dad's like, correct. I'm like, okay,
let's get this clear.
Great.
I'm just
He
here.
still thinks it's a hobby. Like, he still thinks it's a hobby. Most Latin American or Hispanic or Latinx parents still are like, I don't understand what you're doing
right
with your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. I think it's a big contributor to the racial inequality, is this sense of doing a hobby that has no path to financial gain established or hopeful, like to be hoped for. I mean, right? Like if you study, when I went to school, and you know, my dad's first generation, you know, but definitely old school Syrian, and it was like when I went to college, he didn't want me to take my guitar because he didn't want me to be distracted by it. And I couldn't even really play it very well, or didn't play it often even. And then I was going to major in radio, television, and film. And he didn't understand. And my mother fought for it because my sister wanted to do theater and they wouldn't let her, And then she was miserable. And so they kind of learned from that you can't change what somebody wants to do with their life. So that swayed him for my case. But he was just like, my mother was like, what do you want her to do? And he was like, I don't know, economics. And she was like, have you met Stacy? Do you know her? Have you met our daughter?
In comes your brother. He's like, I'll do it.
Yeah, totally. Well, he was the oldest, so he had all the expectations. Yeah. So he became.
I mean, isn't economics kind of like where math meets improvisation? Because I mean, you can make it whatever. Economics just seems like the opportunity to use math to come up with whatever you want to come up with.
I see what
That's
you're saying.
What it seems like to me.
Yeah, sure. It is.
Show me some models. Why? So we can choose one. Why? So we know, this based on what Jill was saying, my family is just, they're gamblers. And then there's myself and my niece each study different languages. But all the gamblers, when my family sees an improv show, a lot of them love it. But I just now realized that most of them say the words, I'll bet that was funny. I'll bet that was hard. My family has not met a circumstance that they cannot figure out a way to gamble or wager on something. and it's like part of it's just like the insurance business. Like, well, I'll bet they don't get this. I bet he doesn't get that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I bet I won't speak another language. Okay. Because they're all studying like odds and math. And to me, that's all rooted in safety. And isn't it interesting that of like the people that were born native English speakers here, like all three of us, and at least like, we all speak different languages, not perfectly, but there's how many, when we go overseas, how often, and maybe Jill, you've heard this too, but just like people are surprised that an American can speak another language, like a white American can speak another language.
And I don't know if this happens to you, Joe, or if it happens to me because I'm a short, soft woman. But when I go to France and I try to speak French, what I get, because they definitely want, my experience is the French want you to try.
Yes.
But at the same time, you're just really not going to be that good at it in their minds for another 20 years. So every time I speak French to a stranger, I'll get like, isn't she cute for trying? Oh, and then they'll answer me in English.
Oh no!
I can get to the next level, especially with Uber or cab drivers in French, where you get that sort of that sigh of resignation looking back in their rearview mirror like, oh. But then if you push through that and then you accept that and let them know quickly that I understand I'm lower status here, but not only am I going to try, I'm going to surprise both of us with what I can come up with.
When I went to Colombia, right? When I went to Colombia with Will we did, what is the name of this festival? Feels like so long ago, but it was just pre-pandemic. It was in Bogota. Well, just right outside of Bogota. We were there, and when I first met the improvisers, they're like, oh, so you're Cuban? And I'm like, yeah, I'm Cuban American. And then I would start talking to them in Spanish. They're like, how do you speak Spanish so well? I'm like, I'm Cuban, but it's what Stacey's saying. It's because we're Americans. I come from the United States. They're like, well, why? I'm like, because I'm Cuban. I'm Cuban. So, it's odd and it's sad because we should know more languages than English, unfortunately. I will say that my boyfriend is Persian and I know some Farsi. And it's just talking about like tying together earlier, we were saying there's so much to learn. And now we're all talking about like French culture. I know some Farsi, and when I've met Persian people, like I've had to learn the hard way that I'm like, oh, I speak some Farsi. I'll start talking to them in Farsi and they're like, what are you doing? Like, calm down. I've had to learn that they prefer to like gain some trust before engaging with me in their language.
Oh,
like,
that's interesting.
Who the hell? I've gotten it a lot, and I've gone to all of the like New Year's festivals for them. And in the beginning, I was so excited that I was learning Farsi that they were like, "You need to calm down. What is your name? Like, who are you?" And I learned that. That's what I learned.
Well, right, there's that part where you learn where you can understand faster, or I can't, understand faster than I can conjure the words myself.
Yeah.
And being immersed will improve that skill. And I went to Turkey as an exchange student in high school and lived with a family. And we went out, after about a month that I had been there, we went out to a wedding in the countryside. It was like sunflower fields just for miles and miles and miles, in this little square in the middle with like light bulbs hung around, little houses. And for the wedding, you'd go from house to house to house and eat, and then you dance all night. And for 3 days,
Nice.
just eating and dancing. It was awesome. And by then I knew enough Turkish to understand that this woman was like, what are these Americans? They come here. They don't even speak our language, right?
Oh,
She's
no.
just like, she's totally bitching that, why don't I even try? And so she gave us the food, and I took a bite of the food and I said, çok güzel, which means very beautiful. And she was like, oh, beautiful. Like, start kissing me. Like, that's all I needed was 2 words. And she just was like, yeah, she's amazing. Hugging me, kissing me, giving me more food to eat every second. It was hilarious. So sometimes you just got to make an effort. It's interesting that some places, they don't necessarily want you to jump in and make an effort. How are we supposed to know? Elise, there's so much to know.
There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. I will say it came in handy because there was to speak some Farsi, because there was a woman who wanted my boyfriend to marry her granddaughter. And she, one day we were leaving a party, like it was right in the beginning when him and I were like kind of dating. And I was, of course, I'm Elise. So I'm like, I'm learning Farsi. I gotta know what these people are saying. And I gotta talk to them. So we're leaving her granddaughter's leaving a party, and her granddaughter comes up, and the grandma, I can understand now, starts to tell him, my granddaughter's leaving alone, and you're not going to walk her out. Like, you're just going to let her walk out by herself. And I go, me famam chimigi. She's like, and that means I understand what you're saying. And she's like, well then, okay. See you later. Like, I told her, I knew that Farsi word. And by the way, that's the only thing in that moment that I knew how to say.
It's kind of the most important. My dad, I mean, can you imagine how great it would be if I could speak Arabic? And my dad wouldn't speak Arabic to us because he said he didn't speak Arabic, even though he did speak Arabic. But compared to the people who had actually immigrated, they would be like, why don't you speak better Arabic? So he grew up thinking he actually didn't speak. And he went to Egypt on business, and they were going to see the pyramids, and went to get in a cab, and the cab driver turned to another cab driver and in Arabic said, watch me take these rich Americans for a ride. And my dad turned to him and said, you dirty thief. And he apologized and ended up taking them for free all day long, like to all the tourist areas. And
Your dad missed out on really something beautiful, because if you ride a cab in Egypt and they're fleecing you, they take you to like, oh, come on to my cousin's shop. And they always take you to their cousin's shop. Like, I've been to so many cousins' shops. like my cousin, somebody's cousin sells perfume. And then the best was like my mom and I trying to convince this person that like, we don't want to buy a Persian rug because we came here on a plane.
And then you can't bring it over anyway.
I can't picture myself trying to take a Persian rug back on the plane, but I'm glad your cousin tipped us off to this incredible sale on Persian rugs.
Have you been to Egypt specifically?
I have. My my brother lived there. Now he lives in Morocco, but he lived in Egypt.
Oh, wow.
For some time. Yeah, it's such an incredible place. You know, you see the pictures of the Great Pyramids, and there's always a lot of desert behind. But Giza is like just outside of Cairo. So if the picture is facing the other way, you see downtown Cairo, like you see the city. So everywhere you are in the city, just like peeking over a building, you see like just like the top of a pyramid at the end of it blew my mind because I'd always pictured the pyramids being out in a vast open desert, and they're really just like. My nephew was like, "Ugh, we have to go to the pyramids for every school field trip." Can you imagine being sick of going to the pyramids? Like,
that's amazing.
We have to go to the pyramids again.
You know, in Istanbul was wild because, and I haven't been there in 30 years, so I it's probably a little different, but the river divides it between its European half and the Asian half of Turkey, which is split into two continents, and it's magical because there's on one side just a very contemporary city that's just like any modern city, and then across the river you're like 2,000 years ago. It's all gorgeous mosques, and like feels like it almost has golden sand all over, you know, just floating in the air, filtering the light, and it was just such a wild connection. You know, we live in such a young country here, and we forget that young country to us, to this nation as it is now. And you know, what's it like to live in a place that's thousands of years old, and there's evidence of that. And I did bring home a carpet, Jill, I have to confess.
What?
My mom.
I'm not in your carry-on.
My mom was like, and it's now in my house because my mom finally, you know, downsized, and so I have it now. But she was like, all I want is a carpet. I just want you to bring me back a carpet. Oh, okay. And I was traveling in Mass with all these other students. We were all exchange students traveling there and back on buses and going to some tourist sites. And I had this massive folded up, as big as like a big roll-on.
They're heavy too.
And I would run ahead of the group with the carpet, put it down, and then I'd run back, get all my other stuff, and then I'd catch up to the front, and then shuttled it all the way back.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow, I sure hope you got a special price from someone's cousin, because that sounds like a lot.
That's the kind of travel I want to do, though. I would rather go to the cousins.
To meet the cousins.
Yeah, I want to meet the cousins.
I didn't mind it. It didn't feel scary. You know, it didn't feel like a dangerous hustle. It felt like a survival hustle, like an opportunity hustle. Like, we have these clearly American women in the cab. Let's try to see if we can get a sale. Like, my mom bought some of the perfume, but my cousin.
Well, there you go. Yeah. That's awesome.
That kind of reminds me of remember when we were in Dubai, Jill, and then we went out to that thing. It was like a big cookout, and then the show and everything, and then the buses stop by. In my mind, it's the Dubai equivalent of Wall Drug in South Dakota, which is just a giant shop with every tchotchke that, like, it just seemed like this is where the Americans will buy things that they think are Middle Eastern that will end up in their living rooms. And then anybody from the Middle East, whoever visits their houses, will laugh at them. And that's
my brother gave me a bunch of those scarabs. Like, there's these like light blue scarabs from Egypt, and I thought they were so special. But then I went to Egypt myself, and everybody just presses them into your hand nonstop.
Yeah. It's like going to Graceland, and then there's pictures of Elvis on everything. Like, look, an Elvis comb. This is an authentic Elvis comb. Oh, look, it's an Elvis toothbrush. It's an authentic Elvis toothbrush. And it's, but I mean,
he used it to brush his teeth?
No, there's outside of Graceland, there's a giant strip mall, and they have little shops that are specifically Elvis specific thing. Elvis specific thing.
So
Elvis
a toothbrush
specific
with
thing.
Elvis's face on it, but not one that entered his mouth.
Or on the side. No, I think that's in the special collection.
But if you do go, I think if you go through Graceland, though, it is a lot of that. Like, this is where Elvis did this, and Elvis always, and they say Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. And my friend who was with us, it was like in the jungle room, the pool table was ripped. And my friend was like, why didn't Elvis fix the pool table? And then when we went to the wishing well, he threw a coin in and he was like, may I never have to come back to Graceland ever again.
Graceland amazes me for like two reasons. It's so small. Elise, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's really, you think of a mansion, but it's really just a small, it's a big house, but not grandiose. I wouldn't call it a mansion. That's the first thing. And then, like, I think about how poor Elvis grew up as a child and as a young person, how poor he was. And everything about that house feels like if you gave a poor kid an unlimited amount of money, like there's no ceiling, buy whatever you want. And I think as a poor kid could say, yeah, I want 2 racquetball courts. Yeah, I want a shit ton of airplanes. It feels like, to suddenly have this grand leap in income where you can make anything you've even fantasized about momentarily come true. Like, you have the ability to actualize all of your childhood dreams with no ceiling. And I wish I could, I wish I could have met him to understand exactly what that feeling is. Like, what is it to go from abject poverty? Like, I've come from my father, grad school poverty, right? Like, I've been poor, but we knew my father was going to graduate soon, so nobody really worried about it. Eat the government cheese and then get over it. But what could it be? What could it have been like to go from being so poor to being absurdly wealthy? To like,
I've read about that, and some people even see it as a nearly, not, I wouldn't say quite traumatic, but almost traumatic experience, because you don't know what to do with it and you don't know what it means for you. And the Queen Iyanla Vanzant, which is she's like a lawyer, therapist, life coach, all of these things. She's friends with Oprah. She says that poverty is a state of being and wealth is a state of mind. So if you take somebody out of poverty and put them into a place with a lot of money, they will still, until they find the state of mind of wealth, they will still be living in poverty.
And this is what we've been talking a lot about, Elise and I, lately, about, like, so there's this part I've been more aware of in previously, and then there's a newer iteration of this that we've been discussing that's become more, I've become more aware of. And the first one is like financial, I've been aware of, and it happens to athletes who become NBA stars or players. It happens to lottery winners, right? Where all you didn't gradually get there and acquire the skills that one must have. Honestly, my mom had a bunch of jewelry that my dad gave her over time, like every birthday, every Christmas, right? And she accumulated it, and it all got stolen last year because I was like, we don't know how to have nice things. Like, there's no safe, in our house to put them in. It was in like, my mom had them like shoved in plastic bags, Ziploc bags.
Oh no, they got stolen?
Yeah. They recovered some of it. But I was like, part of this is like, we don't know what to do with valuables necessarily. Like, we had nice things, but we didn't have like really nice things. And that's just like a tiny middle class version of somebody going from like real poverty to real millions and millions of dollars. And we've been talking about it a lot because we've been talking about being a woman or a person of color. And then all of a sudden you're given visibility, you're given voice, you're given a decision-making power as we're starting to bring people, give more opportunities to people, bring them opportunities that have been denied them previously. How do you do it in a way that isn't overwhelming and doesn't trigger a trauma response? Like any transition does that anyway, but even, so even from something that feels bad to something good. I can't even imagine, like, we don't even know what it's like to have $1 million and everybody know you have $1 million and everybody suddenly wants your $1 million and everyone's suddenly trying to sell you shit, right? And then tell you how you're supposed to invest that.
It makes me think of, like, even in poverty, humans find a way to play with each other and to have fun and turn a stick in a mud puddle into some reality. And the nature of humanity is like how we interact with each other and find fun in the circumstances in which we live. And so I imagine, and this ties into my favorite part of Graceland, that when you grow up without a lot of stuff and you learn how to have fun in a certain way, that's what fun is to you, even when you arrive as an adult. Like, that's what fun is. And now supposedly you're this new status because you have resources to, like, hang with people that also have these resources. But your idea of fun is this thing that you've been doing all your life, which I don't know if you saw this at Graceland or if you know what I'm about to say, Jill, but at Graceland, one thing that Elvis and his crew did was Elvis bought 4 riding mowers, hired a mechanic to take the lawnmower blades off and adapt them so they could have races around Graceland grounds on riding mowers that didn't have lawnmower blades. And nobody would, and there was like buzzes about Elvis and the Mississippi, whatever, but they would around this beautiful, well-kept place, and these guys are out on their riding mowers, riding around.
That's so
because that's
funny.
what fun is.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I grew up basically in poverty. Like, we didn't have a lot of, like, me and my mom didn't have money, and sometimes it'd be like, we don't know what we're going to eat. And I'll tell you what, today, that crackers and mayonnaise tastes just as fucking good as it did back then. Okay?
Yep. I would totally still eat a Velveeta and Miracle Whip sandwich. And we were like, all parts of middle class is where I was from, but there's like pots of food and Velveeta and Miracle Whip on white bread.
We had bacon crisscrosses when we were waiting for the check. It was so, like, as Jill, you said it so eloquently, it was very much like we knew the check was coming. So, like, we just knew the money was out for a couple days. But that would be white bread with a slice of American cheese and 2 pieces of bacon in an X. And so we loved it. Right? Like, that was the cheapest thing she could make. And we were all like, bacon crisscrosses! Yes!
Government cheese, like the government cheese that we got was so much more delicious than any cheese I've had since. And I just have this, like, pity inside of me for people who were too rich to have ever eaten government cheese. They stopped the program, I think, in the late 70s or early 80s. So there's so many people who wouldn't even have had the chance. But it was
Mark Wahlberg made a whole franchise off of government cheese. Wahlburgers, their whole thing is that their hamburger has government cheese. That's what they say.
Maybe they stole the formula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Government cheese. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, my dad, like, even as a grandfather with his grandkids, I think the most played game in my family is like baseball with a crumpled up piece of paper. And then you pitch it, hit it, and then like different parts of the house are like it's a single, double, home run, and then you do all the voices and cheer and commentate, and it's just a crumpled up piece of paper, endless. Or tinfoil's also excellent for that game.
It feels like it would be weightier. Weightier.
You can get a good like a good thump with it.
You can also smash a Coke can down and wrap it in duct tape. And then it's like really, it's like it could be a hockey puck. It could also be a ball.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's car people.
And I went when we did it because I realized you always have to go when you hit it. Like
You make a sound?
yes, I wasn't just doing that for you. I was muscle remembering.
Yeah, that's
Muscle remembering.
Muscle memory.
These things, they all live in our bodies. Isn't that wild? They literally live in our body. Like the crackers and mayonnaise, that's literally in my body.
Yeah.
And I bet you if I had kids, they would be like, I'm into crackers and mayonnaise if I gave it to them one day.
Like saltines or Ritz or like...
Cuban crackers. Hold up.
Yeah.
Crackers!
Don't forget the Maria cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, you're all making me so hungry right now.
I know.
Our pizza was a piece of bread with some ketchup and shake Parmesan cheese. That's how you make pizza. Okay.
Wow.
These are Cuban crackers. La única, right? Like the only.
Pull one out.
Donde hecho.
At this point in time, unfortunately, I'm gluten-free, so I'm not going to eat one, but...
Wow, look at that.
Oh, wow.
La única.
Are they a little puffy or are they crispy?
Wow.
Like
yeah, they're a
water
little
crackers?
puffy.
Yeah.
They're a little puffy.
Yes,
Nice.
yes.
And they're airy, and they're, oh God, I might eat one today.
Do you
They're
just
almost like crispy arepas.
do you snack on them like naked, or do you put things on? And not you naked, the cracker naked.
Let's talk about depression.
You would put either mayonnaise on it or some cream cheese on it.
Jelly.
I'm gonna eat this shit. No jelly. Only unless you're doing cream cheese and guava, then you're doing a little jam.
So Syrian bread, which is pita bread, but we called it Syrian bread growing up. Yeah, we do the same thing. Syrian bread and cream cheese or Syrian bread and butter. Oh, so good.
You know who did teach me how to eat for real though? My boyfriend's family, the way that the Persian culture eats, like just their manner of eating, literally opened my world so much. Just like what they eat for breakfast is completely backwards than what I'm used to. And now I'm like, no, that's forward. What I've been doing is backwards.
So what would be breakfast?
Their breakfast is never egg. Unless they eat eggs at night. Like they eat eggs and tomato and stew at night. And then their breakfast would be like cheese and watermelon. And oh my God, my mouth is watering. Pickles. I'm like salivating. And like pickles. And sometimes even like this turmeric ice cream.
For breakfast?
Yeah, sometimes they would have it for breakfast. And a lot of herbs. Like my family now watches me eat herbs, and I don't ever make a salad. Like I will literally just have lettuce or herbs, and I just like chomp on it with my hands the whole time. And I'm getting so many more greens than I normally would with like a small salad, you know. They taught me how to eat a lot of nuts, a lot of dates. Oh my gosh, I'm hungry.
God.
So many dates.
In
We
Turkey,
need to get Mana and Tanina on here with Persian recipes, and then broadcast on the Improvers talking about food page.
yeah, we could do a cooking with Nate and have somebody teach us. That's what I wanted to do, is have people teach. I want to do a show called Family Recipes, which I started with Shari. She showed me how to
Oh, nice.
the hamantaschen for Purim. So I made those cookies. But I want my sister to teach me how to make all the Syrian dishes that she learned, because the only way to learn is to spend time with my mom. We are so hungry. We are so hungry. But
So true.
I don't know how to make any of it because she never measured anything. You had to be there and learn how to cook with her. And the way she learned how to cook was she would make food and then my grandfather would eat it and then be like, it's great, but not quite how my mother would make it. And then the goal was to learn, which, right, my first reaction was like, that's awful. But then also that's how the tradition gets passed down, right? Like, she grew up without her mom because she came here when she was 6. So without her parents, never saw her parents again. Which is crazy. They wrote letters, but they never saw each other. So she got raised by her oldest sister, which is wild. Can you imagine? So she never went back to Syria either. Like it was actually reminding me when you were saying my grandparents never left the country. My grandmother, who immigrated, kind of had the same attitude, even though she was born in Syria. She was like, why would I go back there? I mean, I guess if you leave a war-torn place, maybe you don't have fond memories of it. But when I've gone to Cuba, I had to drag my dad there. Like
now it's like a new thing because I'm going with him and we're like each other's roll dogs. Like we're just together. And we like sleep in the same room. We're like 2 little, sorority sisters. And so it's become a new thing for him, but first of all, he hates going there because he's now has creature comforts from the first world. So he's like, I'm there and I'm bored. I'm like, shut up. But but I have to drag him back. It's the same thing. Like I have to force him to go to Cuba. He's like, I have to go when it's perfect weather. I'm only staying for 36 hours. I was like, shut up. But he has to. I think there's just so much there. He won't say it. Like, I don't want to go back because it's trauma. He doesn't probably even know what that means. But they don't like to go back. A lot of people don't like to go back. It's wild.
Jill, how long?
And for me, I go there and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, can I go to Cuba with you, Elise?
Yeah.
It's not comfortable, but we'll do it.
Okay.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
Joe and Jill, how long have your families, like how many generations in the Midwest?
I just heard a story that I did not know. My great-grandmother was, my great-grandmother was raised by her aunt, not her parents. And her aunt was from Ireland. So my great-great-grandparents' generation is the generation on both sides that came to the U.S. from Ireland and from Bohemia.
And what were they doing? What brought them to Minnesota?
Oh, I came to Minnesota.
Oh, you did. Where did they? Well, your dad was in Oregon.
We're Southside Irish.
Okay.
We're Southside Irish, Southside Chicago.
Oh, okay.
But I came to Minnesota. My aunt is the one who drew my father to Oregon because she moved out there. She was kind of most of us have stayed in the Chicago suburban area. It was so funny. Elise, you were saying about your dad not going back to Cuba. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to go back to Downers Grove, Illinois. So I understand what your dad means. Your dad and me are the same. I don't want to go back to Downers Grove, Illinois. There's nothing there for me. They tore down our house and built 2 other houses.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I guess part of it's trauma, but part of it's like your dad says, like it's a boring place. It was a fine place to grow up, like really safe and comfortable.
It's in ruins. Like Cuba's in ruins and where we go is in ruins. So he's like, what am I going to do there? Like it's just a bunch of rocks at this point. And so I think that a lot of it is he's also a Scorpio who doesn't want to actually say what he's thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, and at this point, Damascus is totally ruins. It's just rocks and rubble. Because I think like when I was younger, I would have considered going and trying to find, like, my family has a history of being pastors of churches or being priests in the Orthodox Church, but in the Syrian Orthodox Church, you can get married as long as you don't want to be a bishop. So, so we had a lot of that. And, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to go to Damascus and see all the churches that they literally built physically. But they're probably all gone, which is a total.
Yeah.
Joe, how long has your family been in the Midwest?
Well, my father's side's from New York, and so both my grandmothers are Irish descendants. I believe my grandmother, Lillian Moran's mother, was from Ireland. And then, and my grandfather, the Bills are German, are German and Irish, and then the grandmother lineage is just straight Irish. And then my grandmother, I never knew my actual grandmother on my mother's side, but I think they've been here like 5 or 6 generations. But that Irish was like the Irish tinker traveler. And so my mom is Irish French, and they were entrepreneurial spirits, which I think is, I think that means gypsy, con artist, alcoholic, drug addict, mental illness buffet family. They were very creative entrepreneurs, really great storytellers.
Wow.
I've never heard the buffet one before, and I'm going to have to adopt that for my family.
I mean, yeah, we literally have on that side of the family, like everything that's in a psychology book is there.
But not literally gypsy. You mean the term.
Like Irish travelers.
Yes,
yeah. So they're. So
I don't want to drag the gypsies into what your family was doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. They had many homes, and so that travel gene, I feel resonance with that. But my great grandfather was Pierre Rambouche, and they were from Alsace in France. But he and his son Francis Xavier Rambouche, they owned vaudeville houses along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. And so when vaudeville was a thing, my ancestors were running vaudeville houses. And then my grandfather, Truman Rambouche, was with them when they had to change the vaudeville houses into movie houses. And he, as a like an 18, 19, 20-year-old, went with my great-grandfather to kick all of the vaudevillians out. And the reason he wouldn't let my mother be a theater major is because he had a very strong opinion that all actors and actresses were drug addicts, alcoholics, and whores.
Wow.
And it's all from that vaudeville experience. And so, but they were very staunch Catholics, but what I figured out is like this staunch Catholicism is to mask all of the horrendous shit that happened in my family's lineage. And then my grandfather was the first president of a thing called the Motion Picture Theater Owners Association of America. And ironically, he was one of the people who was adamant that movies needed to have ratings on them in order to protect the public interest, so they knew what they would get into. Says his great-grandson, former star of co-ed prison Sluts.
That story was
Who made us
freaking ridiculous.
One time we had to perform at midnight in Denver because they asked Joe, like, what rating? The festival is kind of G-rated for families because of the culture here in Denver.
That's true, I forgot.
What rating is your show? And Joe was like, improv can't be controlled. It comes from your soul. It could be anything. And we were fucking midnight. Midnight.
Oh, bless you.
In the nighttime.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
She's not holding any grudges about that, though, Joe.
No.
Every night at midnight, I shake my fist.
It's true.
Shake my fist to the south.
Love all of
You're
these
both
stories.
Irish. You both have Irish descent, Irish ancestry.
Yeah. True.
I'm gonna wrap it up. We've been talking already for an hour, and I love that. I just love chatting with you all and spending this time together. And I feel that not only are we improvisers who just shared a lot of stories, but we also are going to make the next vaudeville circuit for all of us. That's all I want. And so let's make it happen. Jill, are you in? Is Huge Theater in?
You know, we were talking before the show about whether I want to talk about how sad Minneapolis is right now.
Yes.
This felt like the conversation we had in the car during my grandfather's funeral procession.
Yes.
We laughed so hard.
Yes. It
And
was.
my mother said, "Stop laughing. Everyone can see you."
Sometimes you just need a little.
It's a nice
relief.
reminder
I love it.
that as terrible as things can get, like we all have each other, and one day at a time.
I love you all very much. All of
Love you all.
here with us. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, everybody watching. Lots of love. Improv can bring us together.
Yay!
Good week, everyone. We'll see you next week.